Mirror Talk episode 20 Lexicons in Love, Romantic Language and Nervous System Attachment. Welcome back to Mirror Talk, the language of the nervous system, and welcome to the final episode of Layer 2, Relational Mirrors, the layer where we've spent the last 5 episodes stripping away the myths of communication, comfort, conflict, repair, and regulation between human beings who are trying, often desperately, to feel safe in each other's presence. There is a moment, just before love becomes language, where the body knows what the mouth hasn't yet said, a pause, a pulse, a small shift in breath, that wordless place where connection begins, and just as often, where it silently fractures. If Layer 1 was about self-awareness, the internal mechanisms of regulation, perception, identity, and boundary, Layer 2 has been about what happens when two nervous systems try to exist in the same emotional space without collapsing into survival mode. And now we reach the last doorway of this layer: romantic language, attachment, and the nervous system choreography we call love. Not love in the abstract, not love as poetry, not love as an idea we post online with soft lighting and a distant horizon. But love is a biological event. Love is a patterned response. Love is the most mislabeled nervous system negotiation we ever enter into. That is what episode 20 is here to explore. Across episodes 15-19, we learn something subtle but destabilizing. Most communication isn't spoken. It's regulated or unregulated nervous system signaling. Most conflict isn't disagreement. It's a mismatch in safety states. Most apologies aren't repair. They are performed logic layered over unresolved dysregulation. And most empathy isn't actually empathy. It's rescue, self-protection, or emotional management disguised as care. And if those patterns were intense in friendships, family, and community relationships, they become amplified in romantic ones. Romantic connection is the one arena where we ask the most and understand the least about what is really happening inside us while we love, desire, attach, hope, defend, collapse, cling, or leave. This is where language becomes survival. This is where silence becomes a threat or a gift. This is where every sentence is either co-regulation or separation. And for many of us, without ever meaning to, love becomes a battlefield of unfinished childhood conversations. Personal reflection. Most people don't fear love. They fear the version of themselves they become when the nervous system interprets love as risk. I've reflected more than once on the way the body can betray the story the mind thinks it's telling. How, even when I knew I was safe, the body still braced. How, even when the other person spoke kindly, the nervous system still scanned for exit routes. I once mistook calm for disinterest, distance for rejection, intensity for safety, and silence for abandonment. And at some point, this insight dropped. I wasn't reacting to them. I was reacting to the ghost of every moment I wasn't emotionally met. Love doesn't trigger us, memory does. A relationship doesn't destabilize us. Attachment history does. Words don't wound us. The nervous system assigns meaning faster than thought can catch up. And that is why episode 20 is not about how to communicate better in relationships. It's about how romantic language is a living archive of everything the body has ever learned about closeness, threat, abandonment, responsibility, longing, shame, need, and worth. This episode is not a guide for finding healthy relationships. It is a decoding of why we suddenly become someone else inside them. Because the truth is, we don't choose partners. Our nervous systems recognize patterns. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with the state we feel in their presence. We don't speak from logic. We speak from attachment coding disguised as language. And that means romantic speech isn't verbal. It is somatic, relational, rhythmic, polyvagal. It is a full nervous system event carrying survival signals beneath vocabulary. So today we don't ask, what should I say when I'm in love? We ask, what part of me is speaking, the regulated adult, or the unhealed child wearing adult grammar? So before we go further, I invite you to feel this, not analyze it. Where does your body go when love gets close? Do you soften or scan? Do you lean in or prepare the exit? Do you speak more or disappear? Because in this episode, we're not just studying language. We're exploring the state that chooses the language. And that is the real lexicon of love. If there is one place where language reveals the truth of the nervous system with almost no delay, it is in love, not the poetic kind, but the lived kind. The kind where tone matters more than vocabulary, where safety is communicated faster than intention, and where the body interprets meaning long before the mind decides what is reasonable. Romantic relationships are often described as emotional mirrors, yet for most people, they are far closer to nervous system amplifiers, where everything is intensified, accelerated, and exposed. The very same words that feel harmless in a casual setting can become loaded, weaponized, or deeply reassuring in the context of intimacy. Fine. Whatever. I just need space. I'm not asking again. I'm listening. I'm still here. 6 tiny phrases, 6 different physiological states. What makes them feel like threat, abandonment, reassurance, or invitation has very little to do with semantics, and everything to do with the attachment history and regulation state of the speaker and the listener. This is why 2 people can say "I love you" and mean entirely different things at the level of the nervous system. For one, it might mean connection without fear. For another, it subconsciously means "please don't leave." And for someone else, it might feel like a demand for emotional performance they don't know how to sustain. Love is not a single feeling, it is a set of regulatory patterns. And language inside a relationship is never just communication. It is attachment behavior translated into words. Episode 20 completes layer 2, Relational Mirrors, and in many ways it is the most revealing, not because romantic language is special, but because it is the most unfiltered. We speak differently when the stakes are high, when vulnerability is active, and when the relationship holds the power to soothe or devastate the nervous system. In everyday conversation, we can perform emotional distance. In a romantic connection, we cannot hide the body. That means tone becomes truth, presence becomes proof, silence becomes a signal, language becomes a form of touch. Love does not fail because people stop communicating. Love fails because people never learned the nervous system they were communicating from. And that's what this episode explores. Why love languages matter less than regulatory languages, why emotional needs are not psychological preferences but physiological patterns, how partners trigger each other without ever intending to, why safety is not created by saying the right thing, but by saying anything from the right state, and how to speak love in a way that does not require self-abandonment or emotional translation. Personal reflection. Something I've realized through writing this series, and through my own history of connection, is that I spent years trying to communicate better, without first understanding the state I was communicating from. I used logic when my body was in fear. I used reassurance when my words carried tension. I offered explanations when the other person needed presence. It wasn't dishonesty. It was unconscious dysregulation wearing the costume of clarity. And like many people, I thought the problem was the words, when the real problem was the state behind them. The sentence "I'm okay" can be loving, avoidant, pleading, dismissive, or terrified, depending entirely on the body delivering it. That is the heart of Lexicons in love. Romantic language is always state-coded. The body speaks first. Words simply arrive afterwards to justify it. Where we're going, this episode unfolds in 6 layers, from the biology of romantic attachment, to the linguistics of reassurance, to the trauma patterns that distort intimacy, through to real-world repair and embodied practice. By the time we close this chapter, the question shifts from, how do I say the right thing, to how do I speak from a regulated version of myself, even when love feels risky? Because true intimacy is not created by perfect language. It is created when 2 people can stay present enough to speak without defending, disappearing, or performing safety measures they do not feel. And that brings us to our first layer, the one beneath the metaphors, beneath the story of romance, beneath the thought, I'm just bad at relationships, a layer that lives in the body. Why the nervous system treats love as danger before it treats it as a connection. Before we can understand the language of love, the phrases that soothe, the tones that trigger, the silences that feel like abandonment, the words that land like safety, we have to start beneath language itself. Romantic communication does not begin with speech. It begins with the state. Long before 2 people ever exchange words, the nervous system has already scanned for threat, familiarity, intensity, or safety. The body makes the first decision, and only afterwards does the mind create the story that explains it. That's why love can feel effortless with one person and impossible with another. Not because of compatibility, intelligence, or shared values, but because the autonomic nervous systems recognized or rejected each other before the first sentence was spoken. We don't fall in love with personalities first. We fall in love with regulation patterns, attachment signals, and nervous system rhythms that feel like home, even when home was chaotic, inconsistent, or unsafe. So before we talk about words, repair, conflict, attachment language, or the phrases that either deepen intimacy or fracture it, we begin with the body's first language, the biology of bonding. The reason love feels like danger to some nervous systems and like relief to others. The hidden mechanism behind attraction, misattunement, emotional addiction, and the pull toward people who activate old wounds. And that brings us into our first layer of this episode, not what we say in love, but what is already speaking through us before a single word is formed. Element 1, the biology of bonding, how love speaks before we do, before love becomes a sentence, a promise, a conflict, or a memory. It begins as a nervous system event. Every romantic relationship, even the ones we later call destiny, disaster, or the one that got away, begins with the body running a silent, instantaneous scan. Am I safe with this person? Do I recognize this emotional frequency? Is this connection regulating or activating me? Does my body move toward them, freeze around them, or expand in their presence? We like to imagine attraction is guided by logic, preference, chemistry, shared values, or conscious choice. But the first stage of bonding is not intellectual, it is autonomic. The body speaks first, the story comes later. The first language of love, state recognition. The nervous system has only 3 answers to every new person it meets. 1. You feel safe, and a connection opens. 2. You feel threatened, and protection activates. 3. You feel familiar, and attachment memory decides whether to approach or flee. That means we are never simply attracted to someone. We are responding to the way their voice, posture, eyes, breath, and energy map onto our subconscious catalogue of past emotional experiences. This is why 2 people can look perfect on paper but never create ease in the body. And it's why someone entirely wrong for us can feel like home before we even know their surname. We don't fall for people. We fall for regulation patterns we've been trained to associate with love. Some people feel safe because they match our healing. Some feel like electricity because they match our wounds. Most of us confuse the second for the first. Why intensity is mistaken for intimacy. Many people have never known calm attachment, only nervous system activation dressed up as passion. So when their body encounters someone who doesn't trigger that roller coaster, the experience can feel flat, boring, or not love. This is why phrases like, "there just wasn't a spark," "something was missing, I don't know what," "I need someone who challenges me," often translates, on a nervous system level, to "I couldn't feel my familiar chaos, so my body didn't register this as love." Intensity is often just adrenaline. Adrenaline feels like meaning. Many of us learn to bond through adrenaline, not safety, and we call it chemistry. The polyvagal pattern of attraction, a regulated connection, feels warmth in the chest, steady breath, soft focus, internal quiet, the sensation of ease rather than urgency. An unregulated attraction feels tight stomach, racing thoughts, hyperfocus on the other person, sudden emotional high or fantasy attachment. A pull that feels addictive, not grounding. A belief that losing them would feel catastrophic. One is a connection. The other is activation paired with longing, which the brain mistakenly labels as love, especially if it mirrors early attachment patterns. Why trauma bonds feel like destiny. If someone's nervous system resembles the emotional environment we grew up in, inconsistent, intense, unpredictable, withholding, rescuing, abandoning, the body will register that as recognizable, not dangerous. The child who learned love means earning safety will feel magnetized to adults who make them work for affection. The child who learned closeness leads to pain may be drawn to avoidant or emotionally absent partners, not because they want distance, but because they expect it. The nervous system does not choose what is healthy. It seeks what is familiar, even when familiar means painful. Reflection prompt: ask yourself, when I look back at the people I've been drawn to, was my body moving toward safety or toward what it already knew how to survive? If your past relationships felt like intensity, urgency, obsession, or fear-laced connection, your body may have been bonding through activation, not attunement. And that leads us to the next layer. Why so many people struggle to feel loved when love finally arrives, and why the nervous system often rejects what the mind claims to want. If the first half of bonding is the body scanning for safety, the second half is the story we build around the sensation. Most people do not say, "I'm drawn to you because my nervous system recognizes your emotional rhythm." Instead, they say, "I don't know what it is, I just feel something." That something is the body's subconscious attachment blueprint being activated. The nervous system doesn't want love, it wants predictability. We are taught to chase love with logic, vision boards, dating strategies, or compatibility lists. But the nervous system is not looking for shared hobbies, aligned values, or perfect timing. It is looking for a regulation partner. Sometimes that partner is someone who soothes us. Sometimes that partner is someone who keeps us in the same emotional tension we were raised in, not because the pain feels good, but because the pattern feels known. This is how people can leave a toxic relationship only to recreate the same dynamic with someone new. The mind knows it was painful. The body remembers it as familiar, and familiarity is the currency of survival. Why safety can feel wrong at first. When someone speaks gently, pauses to listen, regulates their tone, and makes space for our emotions, the body should feel relief. But for many people, it doesn't. Instead, the body interprets that calm as, "they don't want me enough. Something's missing. I don't feel the spark. Where's the intensity?" What we call spark is often the body waiting for the other shoe to drop, because that is how love used to feel. Someone who doesn't activate those alarms can be misread as boring, weak, emotionally flat, or not my type, when in reality, they are simply not mirroring our trauma imprint. When chemistry is just unfinished survival. If love once meant working to be chosen, then someone who sees us easily may feel untrustworthy. If love once meant being abandoned, then someone consistent may feel suspicious. If love once meant walking on eggshells, then someone emotionally regulated may feel unreal. The question becomes, do I want the person who feels familiar or the person who feels safe? Because in the beginning, they are rarely the same person. Romantic communication begins before words. Even before the first text message or first date conversation, a silent dialogue has already begun. Breath sinks or clashes, tone rises or softens. Eye contact feels grounding or invasive. Proximity feels opening or overwhelming. In that microspace, the body is already deciding, with you I can rest, or with you I need to perform. This is why two people can say "I love you" and mean wildly different things. Not because the words are dishonest, but because love is filtered through attachment state, survival history, and nervous system capacity. And that brings us to the next element. If bonding begins in the body, attachment speaks through language, not just what we say, but how we say it. Some people love through reassurance, some through space, some through explanation, and through silence. Not because they are selfish, broken, or unloving, but because every nervous system has its own love voice. Reflection prompt: ask yourself, when you feel pulled towards someone, do you mistake familiarity for compatibility? Is my attraction based on peace or on the adrenaline of trying to be enough? If the body selects the connection, the voice maintains it. So the next question becomes, how does attachment speak? What does love sound like when filtered through anxiety, avoidance, or security? And why do two people in love still hear each other as a threat? Next, we explore the linguistics of attachment, the four nervous system love languages that shape every argument, every apology, every I love you, and every rupture that was never meant to happen. Element 2, the linguistics of attachment. The four love voices. Love is not spoken in sentences, it is spoken in signals. Before language constructs meaning, the nervous system assigns meaning to language, deciding whether a word is nourishment, a warning, or a threat. In romantic connection, this becomes unmistakably clear. Two people may say the same phrase, I need you, I'm here, I love you, and yet the nervous system of the listener may interpret each through entirely different emotional filters, shaped not by the present moment, but by the attachment patterns encoded long before the relationship existed. Attachment theory is usually approached as a psychological framework, something about childhood, parents, bonding failure, and emotional wounds. But in nervous system terms, attachment is not just a story we tell, it is a story we speak through. It governs how we pace our speech, how we breathe mid-sentence, how comfortable we are with silence, how quickly we seek reassurance, how intensely we demand distance, and how we interpret another person's tone even when their words are neutral. This is why love becomes confusing, because most people believe they are communicating with words, while in reality, they are communicating with regulatory patterns. Language is only ever the surface layer. Below it, there are four primary nervous system-shaped love voices, not merely styles of relating, but survival strategies disguised as intimacy. The anxious voice, stay with me so I can feel safe. The avoidant voice, don't get too close or I'll lose myself. The disorganized voice, I want closeness and I fear it at the same time. The secure voice, connection is safe even when it's difficult. Most relational conflict is not caused by what is said, but by the nervous system state from which it is said. Two people can speak English, but still not share the same language. Tone becomes tension, silence becomes rejection, reassurance becomes pressure, space becomes abandonment. And instead of hearing one another, individuals hear their own attachment history echoing through someone else's mouth. This is where the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, becomes central. We do not only speak to others, we speak to our unresolved selves through others. If the inner child never received calm, the adult will demand it. If the nervous system were trained to anticipate rupture, even love feels like walking on glass. And if someone learned that affection is conditional on performance, their voice will carry the tremor of self-abandonment even when they think they sound confident. The nervous system writes the script first. The mouth only delivers it. The anxious love voice, connection as oxygen. The anxious nervous system does not want love, it needs it. Love becomes a form of regulation, a way to stabilize the internal chaos that emerges whenever emotional distance is perceived. This voice seeks proximity to feel safe, reassurance to feel real, and immediate resolution to avoid spiraling into abandonment fear. Linguistically, this attachment shows up through fast speech, because silence feels like danger, questions that are not questions, but bids for reassurance. Are you sure? Do you still feel the same? Hyperattunement to tone shifts, reading threat into neutrality, apologizing excessively, not from guilt, but from fear of loss, the unconscious belief. If I don't hold on, I'll be left. This pattern is not needy, it is a survival response. An anxious attached person is not trying to control. They are trying to continue existing in the psychological sense. Their body learned early that love disappears unless chased, so their nervous system chases. Anxious speech is not irrational, it is predictive. It attempts to prevent abandonment before it happens, even if this creates the very tension it fears. The avoidant love voice, closeness as threat avoidant attachment, is not a lack of emotion. It is a lack of permission to feel emotion in connection with others. The avoidant nervous system seeks safety through self-reliance, not because it dislikes love, but because love historically required self-erasure, obedience, exposure, or engulfment. Linguistic patterns include more statements than questions. Distance feels safer than curiosity. Space creating language. I just need time. I'm dealing with things internally. Discomfort with emotional intensity, often changing the subject when feelings surface. Slower, flatter tone, not from coldness, but from shut-down defense. The unconscious belief, if I let you in, I'll lose myself. Avoidant communication is not cruelty. It is boundary preservation born from nervous system threat mapping. Where the anxious voice says, if you pull away, I'll disappear. The avoidant voice says, if you get too close, I will disappear. Avoidance is not the absence of need. It is the refusal to need in front of someone else. The disorganized love voice, come closer, go away. This attachment style carries a simultaneous fear of abandonment and a fear of intimacy because the nervous system learned that the same person could be a source of comfort and danger. Communication becomes contradictory, a push-pull cycle where the longing for closeness is constantly sabotaged by fear of what closeness might cost. Patterns include apology attack loops. I'm sorry, but why did you do that? Emotional whiplash. Warm one moment, withdrawn the next. High intensity followed by high shutdown. Love expressed through crisis, rupture, or testing. The unconscious belief, love is unpredictable and so am I. This voice is often the most misunderstood because even the speaker does not fully understand what they feel. The nervous system is trying to flee and attach at the same time, a double bind of longing and fear. Where anxious speech begs for closeness and avoidant speech protects distance, disorganized speech tries to regulate both impulses at once, resulting in instability, intensity, and confusion that feels deeply personal, but is actually deeply somatic. The secure love voice, connection without threat. Secure attachment does not mean being calm all the time. It means the ability to return to calm without collapsing the relationship. The secure voice is not superior, it is simply not governed by survival logic during emotional exchange. Linguistic patterns, clear ownership language. I feel I need, I'm noticing. Curiosity instead of defense. Tell me how that felt for you. Time does not equal abandonment. Space does not equal rejection. Repair is expected, not feared, the unconscious belief. We can have a rupture and still be safe. Secure communication is not perfect, it is regulated. The nervous system does not treat conflict as a threat to existence, but as an inevitable part of relational life. Where other attachment voices say, if this goes wrong, I'm unsafe, the secure voice says, if this goes wrong, we can come back. Why I love you does not mean the same thing in every nervous system. To the anxious system, I love you means I'm not leaving. To the avoidant system, it may mean you now expect more than I can safely give. To the disorganized system, it may feel like both a promise and a trap. To the secure system, it is a present tense truth, not a guarantee of permanence. This is why relationships break down even when both people mean well. They are not disagreeing about love. They are disagreeing about what love means to the body. Why empathy fails between attachment styles. Empathy is not the ability to understand the words, but the ability to understand the nervous system behind the words. The anxious voice hears distance as danger. The avoidant voice hears intensity as danger. The disorganized voice hears unpredictability as danger. The secure voice hears difference as manageable. One person says, I just need time to think, and their partner hears, I'm being abandoned. Another says, I need you to talk to me, and their partner hears, I'm being controlled. Conflict erupts not from a lack of love, but from a lack of shared regulation. If the first half of this element map the architecture of attachment through nervous system states, then this half brings it to life in speech, in the tiny moments where love feels safe or suddenly doesn't. Because attachment isn't revealed in the vows, the big conversations, the stated promises. It shows itself in the micro-language of everyday connection. The way we say, where were you? The way we answer, are you okay? The breath we take before we need to talk. This is where love is either felt or defended against. And the reason it matters is simple. You can't build a secure relationship with insecure language. You can build routine, survival, shared bills, even a family, but not secure love. Secure love isn't built on presence, but on felt safety, and felt safety is linguistic before it is logical. So now we move from theory into lived reality. 4 attachment styles, 4 tones of love, 4 nervous system signatures, 4 ways language either bridges or breaks connection. Not as a diagnostic, not as pick your category, but as a recognition tool. Which voice do I inhabit when I'm scared? And what does that mean for the person trying to love me? The anxious voice, don't leave me. Even when I sound angry, anxious attachment doesn't begin with need. It begins with anticipatory loss. The body is already bracing for abandonment before the conflict even begins, even before the text is left on read, even before the partner gets quiet. So the anxious voice speaks in pursuit language, urgent, fast, repetitive, front-loaded with emotional charge, often mislabeled as dramatic, when in reality it's a nervous system begging for certainty before it collapses. Tone signature. Fast, rising pitch, breathless speech, stacked questions, intensity, clarity. Threat belief. If I don't hold on, I'll be dropped. Or fear, emotional exile example. You didn't message me back. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong? I just need to know what's going on because I can't sit here feeling like this. Just tell me if something's changed. Notice, it's not the words that overwhelm the partner, it's the tempo. The speech is trying to outrun abandonment. The deeper truth is anxious communicators rarely realize. Their intensity is not anger, it is grief in fast forward. And in my own work and in my own life, I've noticed something. The anxious voice is rarely asking, do you love me? It is asking, will you stay when I'm not easy to love? That is the real question buried inside the pursuit. And the healing doesn't come from being told, calm down. It comes from hearing, I'm not going anywhere. We can slow down together. The words regulate, but the safety comes from the regulated nervous system speaking them. The avoidant voice, don't need me too much, even when I love you. Avoidant attachment is not coldness. It is a protective distance calibrated by nervous system memory. Where the anxious body fears abandonment, the avoidant body fears engulfment, being consumed, required, expected to perform emotional labor it doesn't feel resourced for. So the avoidant voice speaks in compression language, short, minimal, factual, detached, spatially distancing, often misinterpreted as uncaring, when in reality it is a body trying to preserve autonomy so it doesn't drown. Tone signature, flat effect, shortened sentences, lower neutral pitch, silence as regulation. That belief. If I get too close, I lose myself. Or fear, emotional invasion example, I just need space right now. It's not about you. I'll talk when I'm ready. To the anxious ear, this sounds like retreat. To the avoidant body, this is safety. But here's the hidden paradox. Avoidants crave connection just as deeply, but only when connection doesn't cost selfhood. Most avoidants are not trying to avoid love. They are trying to avoid the emotional over-responsibility they were conditioned into as children. So the question they never voice but always live, can I be close and still be me? No amount of emotional pressure can fix avoidant withdrawal, but a calm, non-demanding presence can. I'm here. You don't have to come toward me until your body wants to. I won't chase, but I won't disappear either. That is secure love speaking safety into the distance. The disorganized voice, come close, go away. Love as a threat response, where anxious and avoidant speak from predictable nervous systems. The disorganized style speaks from fragmented ones, systems that cannot decide whether closeness is safety or danger. So the disorganized voice is contradictory language in motion. Pull in, push away. I need you becomes get away from me becomes why don't you fight for me? Tone signature. Emotional whiplash, ruptures without completion, mixed signals, intense vulnerability, and sudden hostility. Threat belief. Love is unpredictable, so I must preempt the pain. Core fear, both abandonment and engulfment. Example. I hate that you're not here, but I also can't stand feeling this way when you are. This voice is not manipulative. It is unresolved trauma speaking in real time. Their body has not learned to experience safety in proximity, so every attempt at intimacy activates both longing and terror. In every relationship with a disorganized attacher, one question hides beneath the chaos. If I let you love me, what will it cost me? The repair here does not begin with reassurance. It begins with a predictable presence, the opposite of what they grew up with. I won't force closeness. I won't punish distance. I'll be steady so your body can learn what safety feels like. That line, delivered calmly, is not a script. It's a regulation event. The secure voice, we can stay in this together. Secure communication is not perfect. Endless patience is required. It is regulated speech under stress. The secure voice isn't calm because nothing is wrong. It is calm because it trusts repair. Tone signature, grounded pacing, ownership language, I feel I need, curiosity before defense, listening without self-abandonment. Threat belief, conflict is discomfort, not danger. Core truth, connection doesn't require agreement, only safety. Example, I'm feeling activated, but I still want to stay in this conversation. I need a moment to breathe, so I don't talk from defense instead of clarity. Security isn't the absence of triggers. It's the presence of awareness while triggered. And the defining mark of secure love isn't that people never hurt each other. It's that they don't leave each other alone with the pain. So when the secure voice says, I'm not leaving, but I need a moment to gather myself, it is balancing two nervous system truths. I stay connected to you without disconnecting from myself. That is emotional integrity in real time. The shift, attachment isn't changed by working on communication. It's changed by learning to speak from a regulated body. Every attachment style becomes softer, safer, and saner when the nervous system is not in survival mode. Which brings us here. The goal isn't to sound secure. The goal is to become regulated enough that secure language becomes available. That opens the door to the next element, the one where love turns into conflict, not because hearts changed, but because nervous systems went to war without realizing it. So now that we've mapped the 4 attachment voices in connection, the next question is unavoidable. What happens when those same voices meet conflict? Why do lovers trigger each other more than strangers? Why does disagreement so easily turn into survival speech? Why does the person we love become the person our nervous system treats like a threat? That's where we go next. Element 3, when love becomes a battlefield. Conflict, closeness, and survival speech when intimacy activates the instinct to defend. We like to believe that conflict in love happens because two people just don't understand each other, or because someone is being unreasonable, stubborn, insensitive, detached, or dramatic. But under the surface of most romantic conflict lies something far older, far faster, and far less logical than disagreement. The nervous system's attempt to survive emotional threat. A stranger can insult you, and we might shrug. A colleague can misunderstand us, and we can let it slide. But when someone we've bonded with, someone whose presence signals safety, belonging, and emotional oxygen, suddenly feels unavailable, disapproving, or unpredictable, the body treats that shift as a rupture in the survival bond. That's why conflict in love rarely feels proportional to the moment. A small comment can trigger a storm. A delayed reply can feel like abandonment. A neutral tone can feel like rejection. And the mind will create a story to explain the sensation, but the sensation came first. Romantic conflict is not just about what was said. It's about what the nervous system interpreted as danger. This is why relationships don't fall apart because of communication problems. They fall apart because two bodies in threat response start using words as weapons, shields, or escape routes instead of connection. Why lovers trigger each other more than strangers. The nervous system is designed to protect us most fiercely in the places we feel most vulnerable. And nothing exposes the nervous system like intimacy, real intimacy, the kind with emotional investment, sexual bonding, shared identity, memory, longing, future building, dependency, and attachment wounding all woven together. A stranger cannot trigger your abandonment wound. A colleague cannot activate the unmet need you carried from childhood. A friend cannot collapse your nervous system, the way a withdrawn partner can, because friendship does not carry the same survival coding that pair bonding does. We do not panic when a stranger goes quiet. We panic when the person who promised safety suddenly feels emotionally far away. The truth is uncomfortable but necessary. Romantic conflict isn't an intellectual disagreement. It's a dysregulated attachment response wearing language as clothing. The words come later, the body fires first. The loop. How love turns into a nervous system battlefield. Every unresolved childhood template eventually finds its way into adult intimacy, not as memory, but as response. What looks like an argument, a cold silence, a desperate message, or a slammed door is rarely about the surface moment. It is the body trying to protect itself from what it once experienced as unbearable. The cycle usually begins with pursuit. One person feels the connection slipping, a change in tone, a delay in a text, a shift in eye contact, and their nervous system interprets it as danger. They reach, they ask, they demand, they explain, they plead, they analyze. But underneath all the words is one sentence the body is screaming. Don't disappear. I can't survive that again. The other partner often responds not with closeness, but with shutdown. Not because they don't care, but because their wiring has learned that emotional intensity equals failure, conflict, attack, loss of autonomy, or, in many cases, punishment. They go quiet, numb, logical, or physically distant. What looks like indifference is often a self-protective freeze. If I stay still, this won't escalate. If I say the wrong thing, I'll make everything worse. Shutdown does not soothe the pursuer, it activates protest. The quieter one goes, the louder the other becomes. Anger, accusations, exposure of old receipts, emotional ultimatums. All of it is the nervous system trying to force engagement before abandonment becomes real. The protester doesn't want to win, they want to matter. But the further they reach, the faster the other retreats. Eventually, both collapse into what feels like emotional exile. One feels punished for caring too much. The other feels punished for not being able to feel enough. Both are left alone, one with panic, the other with shutdown. The tragedy is that both are hurting for the same reason. They never learned how to stay safe in closeness. And so the cycle repeats, not because either wants to hurt the other, but because the body is still trying to solve an old wound with the wrong survival strategy. No one is really the villain. The nervous system simply picked a side a long time ago and is still convinced the threat is real. You can call these communication styles, but they are actually nervous system survival styles. The fight isn't really about the dishes, or the tone, or the text message, or the weekend plans. It is about this ancient question: when I feel unsafe with you, will I lose you? Or lose myself? Some people choose closeness at any cost, even self-abandonment. Some choose self-protection at any cost, even at a cost to the connection. Some try to force repair through argument, pressure, or intensity. Some disappear into silence, because their bodies have learned that speaking equals danger. The tragedy is that both people usually want the same thing, closeness, but they are using incompatible survival strategies to reach it. Trauma-bonded language versus safety-bonded language. When two dysregulated nervous systems attempt to connect, the language that comes out is not relational. It is survival speech. Survival speech is fast, blunt, accusatory, absolutist. It uses you always and you never because threat response is binary. It collapses nuance because the brain is trying to win, not understand. Safety-bonded language sounds completely different, not because the person is better, wiser, kinder, or more mature, but because their nervous system is not fighting for oxygen. Even the difference in tone is biological, not moral. A dysregulated voice tightens, short breath, clipped sentences, sharp consonants. A regulated voice expands, slower pacing, warmer tone, more access to emotional vocabulary. You cannot speak a safe sentence from an unsafe body. This is why the advice "just communicate better" is laughably incomplete. You cannot mindset your way into safety. You have to regulate for safety. And this is where most relationships fail. They analyze the words exchanged, instead of the nervous systems that chose those words. Personal reflection: I used to think I was arguing for clarity, but I can see now I was arguing for safety. I wasn't trying to win, I was trying not to feel powerless. But because I didn't know the difference, I used language like a shield. I didn't realize it then, but my nervous system was speaking louder than my intentions. This is the moment most people reach in hindsight, when the survival voice quiets long enough to tell the truth. What actually hurts in conflict? Most people don't collapse in pain because of the argument itself, but because of the loss of emotional safety inside the argument. It is not what you said, but I couldn't feel you anymore when you said it. It is not disagreement that destroys intimacy, it is disconnection. Two regulated people can disagree without rupture. Two dysregulated people can agree and still feel broken. So the real question in romantic conflict is not, who is right? Who started it? What should I have said differently? But which version of me was speaking, the defended one or the connected one? Reflection prompt: ask yourself, when I'm hurt, do I reach for closeness or control? Write or sit with this gently. Your body will answer faster than your mind. The war we don't know we're fighting. Conflict in relationships is rarely a disagreement about content. It is almost always a disagreement about safety. Most arguments are not really about the dishes or the tone or the message left on read or the weekend plans or who is right. They are about nervous systems trying to negotiate whose pain gets to matter first. What looks like stubbornness is often fear. What looks like shutting down is often overwhelming. What looks like emotional intensity is often abandonment panic. What looks like detachment is often inner collapse, and what looks like anger is often grief that has nowhere safe to land. The problem is not that couples trigger each other, it's that they don't know they're speaking from activation, not agency. The nervous system takes the microphone, and the relationship becomes a site of reenactment instead of repair. The survival agenda hidden inside romantic conflict. When the body registers emotional threat, it does not care about fairness, nuance, or love, it cares about survival. The thinking brain prefrontal cortex becomes inhibited, and the speech that follows is shaped by older circuitry, amygdala alarms, attachment reflexes, and the remnants of whatever childhood strategies once worked. In this state, every partner is trying to win safety, not win the argument, but the nervous system has a cruel habit of masking the need beneath the defense. Why don't you ever listen? Really means, I need to know I still matter to you. You're overreacting. Really means, I feel overwhelmed and I don't know how to stay present. You don't care about me. Really means, if I can't feel you, my body assumes I've already been abandoned. I'm done rarely means done. It means, I don't know how to stay without losing myself. Trauma logic versus relationship logic. When someone is activated, their body is not responding to this moment. It is responding to every moment like it that came before. This is why lovers can feel like enemies. Your nervous system is arguing with a ghost, but your partner is standing in the firing line. This is why two people in love can have two completely different emotional timelines. One partner is in now, the other is in before. One is reacting to the words spoken today. The other is reacting to the pattern that feels like yesterday. And because few people are taught nervous system literacy, they think the conflict is about logic, morality, or communication skills, when in truth the body is simply trying to protect the self from reliving the original wound. So instead of resolving the conflict, we escalate it. We repeat the loop. We fight for safety instead of building it. We try to win the moment instead of heal the moment. The relationship bleeds, not because love is missing, but because self-awareness is. The missing skill, differentiating need from strategy. Every emotional trigger contains a need and a strategy, but most people collapse them into one. Need, I want to feel close again. Strategy, why don't you ever show up for me? Need, I don't want this to turn into a fight. Strategy, just calm down, you're being dramatic. Need, I need reassurance I'm not losing you. Strategy, do you even care about this relationship anymore? The more the nervous system panics, the more the strategy becomes a weapon. Which is why conflict rarely feels like two people trying to reconcile. It feels like two frightened children wearing adult armor. The emotional cost of unresolved conflict loops. Not all damage in love comes from cruelty. Much of it comes from unregulated attempts to connect. The pursuer feels ashamed of being too much. The withdrawer feels defective for never being enough. Both believe they are the one failing love. Eventually, couples stop arguing, not because they have healed, but because they have given up trying to reach each other. This is where emotional numbness enters, and numbness is always more dangerous than conflict. Conflict means the relationship still matters. Numbness means the body has decided the outcome is already lost. This is why many relationships do not break from big moments, but from micro failures of repair, unresolved ruptures that accumulate until the nervous system decides. It is safer to stop caring than to keep hurting. The hidden truth. Conflict isn't the problem. Disconnection is. The real wound is not disagreement. The real wound is not felt. People don't need perfect phrasing. People don't need to be instantly understood. People don't even need their partner to agree. What they need, what the body demands, is, show me that you're still here while I'm hurting. If the connection stays intact, the conflict becomes growth. If the connection breaks, the conflict becomes trauma, which means the real skill of love is not a communication technique. It is the ability to stay regulated while staying in a relationship. Some people don't fight for closeness at all, not because they don't feel, but because they've learned that vulnerability is a trap, that love requires performance, or that safety must be earned by pleasing, fixing, or disappearing. To understand why relationships fall into cycles of idealization, rescue, testing, or emotional withdrawal, we must step deeper into the invisible stories we bring into connection. Which brings us to the next layer, element 4, psychological insight, the fantasy, the fixer, and the fragile self. Why we idealize, rescue, test, or emotionally disappear in love, and how childhood attachment scripts shape adult intimacy. There is a moment in almost every relationship where the story we thought we were in collides with the reality we are actually in. The nervous system registers the shift before the mind can name it. A tightening in the chest, a drop in the stomach, a sudden urge to pull closer or pull away. What most people call relationship problems are almost always nervous system collisions wearing the mask of personality differences. And nowhere does this become more visible than in the 3 instinctive roles lovers fall into when connection feels uncertain: the fantasizer, the fixer, and the fragile self. We do not invent these roles in adulthood. We inherit them. They are the emotional artifacts left behind by the early relational environments that shaped us. Romantic conflict is not the point where we stop being who we were, it is the point where who we were returns. The partner is not the trigger, the partner is the mirror. The fantasy self, the lover who builds the ideal to avoid the real. The fantasy version of love often begins as an attempt to escape emotional chaos. If early life was unpredictable, unheld, or filled with conditional affection, the psyche learns to survive by imagining the kind of love it never received. This fantasy becomes a blueprint. The person who will finally make me feel safe, the relationship where nothing hurts, the love that makes everything before it makes sense. But this template comes with an invisible cost. The fantasy lover is not loving a partner. They are loving the idea of what the partner could be, once, fully healed, fully available, finally aligned, or no longer flawed. The unmet childhood need becomes the unconscious job description the other person never agreed to fulfill. The nervous system doesn't fantasize because it is hopeful. It fantasizes because it is scared to feel again what it once felt alone. Fantasy is not delusion, it is protection. But it comes with a predictable collapse. When reality fails to match the imagined bond, the body responds with shock, disappointment, or even betrayal, and not because the partner changed, but because the spell broke. And so the cycle begins. 1. The fantasy protects the self from vulnerability. 2. Reality intrudes. 3. The nervous system panics. 4. The illusion requires repair, often by demanding that the partner become the fantasy again. This is why disappointment in love often feels disproportionate. It's not one person failing another, it's the collapse of a regulatory illusion. The fixer, the lover who repairs others to avoid feeling themselves. The fixer is often praised in society, caring, supportive, selfless, dependable, but internally they are not calm, they are containing. Their nervous system does not rest until everyone else is steady, not because they enjoy rescuing, but because they were raised to believe safety is only possible when no one else is upset. The fixer learns early that the quickest way to avoid abandonment, punishment, or chaos is to soothe others before tending to themselves. As an adult, this becomes something that looks like empathy, but is actually emotional control disguised as care. I just want you to feel better, because I can't relax until you do. Let me fix this, because your discomfort destabilizes my body. Don't worry, I'll handle it, because I've learned love is earned through usefulness. The fixer is not trying to dominate. They are trying to prevent the return of helplessness. But every fixer eventually breaks. Not because they run out of love, but because they run out of nervous system capacity. They suppress their own needs long enough that resentment becomes the only boundary still available. They say, I do everything for everyone and no one ever shows up for me. And it's true, not because they were unloved, but because they made themselves unreceivable. A partner cannot meet needs that are never expressed, and the fixer cannot express needs without feeling guilty for having them. Which means this form of love eventually collapses into one of two outcomes. The fixer burns out and withdraws. The fixer explodes and shocks everyone who believed they were always fine. Both are nervous system events, not personality failures. The fragile self, the lover who cannot survive disappointment. If fantasy is protection and fixing is control, fragility is the nervous system in its pure, unarmored state. This is the lover who appears confident until the slightest disruption reveals how thin the emotional scaffolding really is. The fragile self does not fear abandonment as a concept. They relive it somatically every time affection is delayed, tone changes, or repair is not instant. In fragile attachment, unmet needs do not create conflict, they create collapse. A partner's silence becomes a verdict, a cancelled plan becomes rejection, a disagreement becomes proof of unlovability. The body spirals, not because logic is missing, but because the threat is felt, not thought. The fragile self is not weak. They are overwhelmed by the weight of what love now represents. To them, connection does not feel like mutual experience. It feels like oxygen rationing, and so they adapt. They walk on emotional eggshells to keep love predictable. They apologize even when they weren't at fault. They monitor tone, timing, mood, message replies, and micro-expressions. They love not from fullness, but from vigilance. Their love is sincere, but it is also survival. Three roles, one shared origin fantasy, fixing, and fragility are not character types. They are regulatory strategies. They emerge when the nervous system learns that love is something you must earn, fixing, something you must protect from reality, fantasy, something you may lose at any moment, fragility. But underneath all three is the same unmet developmental question. Is it safe to be myself in connection, or must I modify who I am to stay loved? The body answers long before the mind does, and until a person becomes conscious of this pattern, every relationship becomes not a shared present, but an echo of the first attachment environment. The nervous system test, love or fear? A useful reflection. When I conflict with someone I love, do I move toward them, manage them, or disappear from myself? Moving toward without regulating, to fantasy, managing them to fixing, disappearing from myself, leading to fragility. These behaviors don't define us. They show us where love still activates survival instead of safety. How these patterns speak. The nervous system in language long before a person realizes they're stuck in a relational loop. Their speech reveals it. Not the literal words, but the tempo, tone, pacing, urgency, and emotional intent behind them. A fantasy-driven lover speaks from the future, not the present. Once you finally open up, things will be different. I just know we're meant for more than this phase. If you could just see what we could be. Their language tries to pull the relationship forward because reality feels too slow, too ordinary, too disappointing. The unspoken message beneath the words is, please become the person who saves me from the version of myself I don't want to feel. A fixer speaks in instruction disguised as care. I just want to help you. Why won't you let me? If you'd just try this, it would all get better. Let me take care of it. You don't need to worry. There is love in the tone, but there is also pressure, a quiet panic hiding under reassurance. The nervous system is not curious. It is managing the situation so it can finally exhale. The message beneath the words, I need you to feel okay so I can stop feeling unsafe. The fragile self speaks in emotional absolutes. If you cared, you wouldn't have done that. I can't handle this, it's too much. I guess I just don't matter to you. The language is not manipulative, it is flooded. The body is speaking faster than the mind can process nuance. The message below the words, I don't know how to hold pain and connection at the same time. None of these speech patterns is about truth. They are about survival. Why these patterns clash in intimacy fantasy cannot coexist with reality for long. Fixing cannot coexist with autonomy. Fragility cannot coexist with emotional uncertainty. So when two partners enter a relationship with different relational survival strategies, the nervous system begins to read the other as a threat. The fixer reads fragility as neediness. The fragile lover reads fixing as control. The fantasy-driven lover reads boundaries as a lack of devotion. And all three feel misunderstood. Even when love is real, the conflict is never about dishes, replies, tone, time, space, or unmet expectations. The conflict is always, my body doesn't feel safe in the way you love me. The tragedy is that most people don't know this is what is happening, so they increase behavior instead of increasing regulation. They try more talking, more reassurance, more fixing, more questioning, and more analyzing. But more was never the missing ingredient. Safety was. The moment the pattern breaks, patterns don't end when the other person finally behaves differently. They end when the nervous system recognizes, I can stay with the sensation of dysregulation without outsourcing my peace. That is the first moment love stops being a survival strategy and becomes a shared human experience. Until then, we are not in a relationship. We are in a shared trauma management system, personal reflection. There was a point in my own history where I thought my emotional insight was love. I believed that if I could scan the other person's inner world fast enough, anticipate their needs, and offer the right words at the right moment, I was being a good partner. I didn't realize I had built a role, not a relationship, and that I was doing it partly to avoid the discomfort of being on the receiving end of love instead of the managing end of it. Looking back, I wasn't being generous. I was being protective. Out of them, but of me. It took years to notice the difference between connection and emotional occupation, between loving someone and making myself indispensable, so I never had to feel replaceable. That shift didn't come from insight. It came from nervous system truth. I had never learned how to feel safe while being loved without performing usefulness. That is when the healing started, not when I learned better communication, but when I learned my value wasn't earned through emotional labor. This episode is written for the version of me who didn't know that yet, and for the people who are still living inside that reflex without realizing it isn't love. It's survival choreography. Fantasy protects us from the ordinary. Fixing protects us from helplessness. Fragility protects us from abandonment. And yet, the one thing all three fear the most is the very thing that would heal them. Being seen without altering themselves to stay loved. We can't think our way out of these patterns. We have to practice our way out, which is why the next element is not theory, it's real-time relational medicine. Element 5, integration practice, the compassion code in real time. There comes a point in every episode in this series where the theory has to land in the body, where insight has to translate into lived behavior, and where the nervous system, not the intellect, becomes the real classroom. This is that point in this episode. Up to now, we've explored empathy, rupture, projection, survival speech, and the mirror dynamics of conflict. But none of it means anything if we cannot apply it while activated. Anyone can be wise when calm. The real test is whether the wisdom survives the heartbeat spike, the breath shortening, the heat in the chest, the urge to defend, or the anxious need to explain. That's what this element is for, not concepts, but integration, the spiritual and physiological art of remembering who we are while our nervous system tries to make us forget. And the most reliable entry point into that is a repeatable embodied sequence, to regulate, to reflect, and to respond. This is the compassion code in real time. It is simple to write, difficult to practice, and life-saving to master. 1. Regulate, the pause that protects the relationship. Regulation is not the suppression of emotion. It is the slowing down of survival speed. The body does not care whether the words we are about to say are loving, rational, justified, or even correct. The body only asks one question. Am I safe enough to think, or do I need to defend? If we speak before answering that question, fight language or fawn language will speak for us. This is why the first step of the compassion code is not communication. It's nervous system restoration. A real pause, not a silent performance of patience. A literal recalibration of breath, tone, presence, and pacing. If the system is still in sympathetic activation, fight, flight, or dorsal collapse, freeze, shutdown, There is no version of talking it through that won't turn into either self-protection or self-abandonment. Every rupture, every argument, every emotional spiral, every regretted sentence begins with skipped regulation. This is why the deepest compassion work is internal first, not relational first. If I cannot sit with my own activation, I will not be able to sit with yours. If I cannot slow my own breath, I will try to speed up your healing. If I cannot tolerate my own discomfort, I will use empathy as a tool of control, not love. Nervous system safe language begins before language is spoken. 2. Reflect, the question that interrupts survival speech. Once the body has been slowed down, the second step begins, not with explanation, but with self-inquiry. What is my real intention here? Connection, control, or escape? This is the reflector that stops the default pattern from running the interaction. Most people speak to reduce their internal discomfort, not to build relational clarity. That's why so many apologies are really self-soothing rituals disguised as care. That's why reassurance often demands an emotional receipt instead of offering safety. That's why I just need to say this usually means I need to get this out of my body and into yours. Reflection is the moment we ask, am I speaking to be heard or to win? Am I trying to build a bridge or prove I'm right? Am I asking the other person to hold my pain or to hold me accountable? This is where empathy becomes integrity, not softness, not niceness, not emotional performance, but the courage to check what's driving the impulse to speak at all. Reflection is what prevents two nervous systems from reenacting two different childhoods inside one present-day argument. 3. Respond, speaking at the speed of safety. Only when the body has settled and the intention is known does the response become trustworthy. A regulated response is not only slower in tempo, but it is also slower in ego. It doesn't rush to fix. It does not chase closure. It does not fear silence. It makes room for the other person's experience without self-abandoning or self-inflating. A regulated response sounds like, I want to understand what this brought up for you. I'm listening. I can feel myself getting activated, so I'm slowing down before I speak. I hear that there was an impact. I'm willing to talk about it without defending myself. I'm not clear yet, but I care. Let me stay with this before I react. None of these statements forces resolution. They create oxygen in the connection rather than pressure. The unregulated voice tries to end the experience. The regulated voice creates space to stay in it without escalating the threat. That is the difference between protection and projection, between empathy and emotional management, between real love and survival bonding. Personal reflection. There was a point in my own relational life, not long after beginning this whole body of work, when I realized how many of my loving explanations were really nervous system reactions in disguise. I wasn't responding. I was trying to repair my internal discomfort before dealing with the actual relational moment. What looked like attentiveness was actually urgency. What sounded like logic was actually fear. What I called clearing things up was just my need to stop feeling dysregulated. That was the moment I stopped asking, what should I say? And started asking, what state am I in before I say anything? It didn't fix everything, but it changed everything. Why this sequence matters? Because without regulate, reflect, respond, the relationship never gets the real version of us, just the survival version. And a survival speech cannot build a connection. It can build intensity. It can build dependency. It can build temporary relief. It can build cycles of rupture and repair, but it cannot build safety. Compassion without regulation becomes self-betrayal. Honesty without reflection becomes violence. Empathy without boundaries becomes emotional labor. This is why the compassion code is not a technique. It is a practice of self-governance in high activation states, and it is the only way love survives the moments that break it. There's a moment in every conflict, whether quiet or explosive, where the body decides what kind of love is going to be spoken next, not the mind. Not the logic, the body. Most of us were taught to communicate from the mouth first, nervous system second. Say the right thing, be polite, don't make it worse. But in real intimacy, whether romantic, familial, or deep friendship, regulation isn't an intellectual achievement. It's an energetic transmission. We've all lived the difference. Someone can say, I love you, while their jaw is locked, brows tense, and breath is held hostage, and the body hears, you're not safe. Someone else can say almost nothing. Just breathe with us, soften their shoulders, slow their pacing, and the body hears, you don't have to defend anything here. That is the core of this practice. Love is not just what we say. Love is the state we speak from. And if the state is dysregulated, the language will always carry the residue of threat, even when the words sound kind. Where most communication breaks down, when we're triggered, the instinct is to speak fast, to prove, defend, justify, or reclaim dignity. But fast speech is almost always survival speech, and survival speech always has one hidden goal. I need you to change so I can feel safe again. That's not a relationship. That's nervous system outsourcing. Regulated speech has a different goal. I want to stay connected without abandoning myself. Those two sentences belong to different biological states, and they create different outcomes every single time. The moment of split, dysregulated versus regulated speech. Here's how it sounds in the real world, not in theory. Dysregulated, you don't listen. You never listen. I'm done trying. Regulated, slowed, breath-led. I'm activated and my brain is telling me you're not hearing me. I want to stay here, but I need a second to breathe so I don't turn this into a fight. Same emotion, different architecture. One collapses the connection. One protects the connection while honoring the self. That's the core skill of relational nervous system language. Not staying silent, but staying regulated enough that honesty doesn't turn into harm. When regulation feels like losing, there's a reason people resist slowing down in conflict. It can feel like surrender, like saying you win, I'll be calm. But that's not regulation. That's fawning disguised as peacekeeping. True regulation isn't passive, it's self-governing. It sounds like, I'm not abandoning what I feel, I'm just refusing to weaponize it. Or, I care about this too much to talk from the part of me that just wants to survive. When I started practicing this myself, it wasn't graceful. Sometimes the breath was there, but the tone still betrayed resentment. Sometimes the pacing was slow, but the words were sharpened blades. Sometimes the body was calm, but the ego still wanted the last cut. That's when I learned something that changed the entire way I speak in conflict. Regulation isn't about perfection, it's about direction. If I'm moving toward truth instead of defense, connection instead of performance, I'm already repairing relationship scripts in real time. Here are a few short examples of rewired love language, not as rules, but as nervous system alternatives. Instead of, what's your problem? Why are you acting like this? Try, something shifted in you and I can feel it. Do you need space or presence right now? Instead of, fine, whatever, I don't care anymore. I care, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm going quiet so I don't say something I'll regret. Instead of, forget it, I shouldn't have said anything. Try, I'm shutting down because I don't feel heard. I don't want to disappear. I just need a pause that doesn't feel like punishment. Instead of, just tell me what you want. Try, I'm trying to read what you need, but I'm guessing instead of listening. Can you tell me how to meet you better right now? These aren't nice lines. They are regulated lines, spoken when the breath slows enough for the frontal cortex to come back online, so the body stops treating the person we love like a predator. A ritual. I slow my breath before I shape my words. This isn't poetic, it's biological. The moment the exhale lengthens, the vagus nerve begins switching the body out of threat mode. The voice softens naturally, the face unfreezes, meaning returns. Every relationship argument that spirals has one missing ingredient. Not agreement, not logic, but someone willing to regulate first. The ritual isn't complicated. It goes like this. 1. Feel the activation, jaw, chest, breath. 2. Buy time with truth, not silence. I want to stay connected, but I need a second to let my body catch up. 3. Exhale for twice as long as you inhale. 4. Speak only after the pace drops. 5. Say what is true, not what is protective. Do this once, and it's a skill. Do this repeatedly, and it becomes a relational identity. Reflection prompt. Ask yourself, what version of me speaks when I feel threatened, and what version of me speaks when I feel safe? If those two versions sound like different people, then love language is not a problem of words, it's a problem of state. We've explored the practice. We've rebuilt the language. We've learned how intimacy sounds when spoken from regulation instead of reactivity. Now we arrive at the question that ends every episode in this layer. What kind of love remains when truth, conflict, and nervous system activation have all entered the room and no one abandons themselves? That's where we're headed next. Element 6, closing whisper, the kind of love that doesn't cost you yourself. There is a kind of love that expands both people. And there is a kind of love that quietly asks one person to shrink first. Most of us didn't learn the difference in childhood, not because we were unloved, but because we were loved through someone else's nervous system, through someone else's trauma language, through someone else's idea of what connection required. Some of us learned that love meant caretaking. Some learned that love meant compliance. Some learned that love meant intensity. Some learned that love meant silence, because silence was the only thing that prevented things from getting worse. By the time we reach adulthood, we aren't just searching for a partnership. We are searching for a different emotional climate than the one we inherited. But the body carries templates, and unless they are named, the nervous system will confuse familiar with safe and bonding with belonging. That is why this final element exists, not to give a sentimental ending, but to offer a kind of physiological clarity about love that most people never receive. Love is not proven through self-abandonment. Closeness does not require collapse. A connection that costs you your selfhood is not a connection. It is survival masked as devotion. Where previous elements explored chemistry, attachment, conflict, projection, and repair, this final one returns to the reason we learn any of this at all, so that love doesn't have to be something we survive. The myth we were sold. Real love requires sacrifice. We were told both culturally and personally that love is measured in what we're willing to give up. Give up your needs. Give up your boundaries. Give up your voice, your preferences, your anger, your limits. Give up the parts of you that are too much. Give up the parts that make someone else uncomfortable. Give up the part that says this hurts, because love isn't supposed to hurt, so if it does, you must be the problem. This myth is not romantic. It is functional to power. A person who abandons themselves is easy to keep and even easier to control. What we call love is often the emotional economy of mutual nervous system dysregulation. One person fawning to keep the peace, the other depending on that fawn response to feel secure. And because both people are scared of losing the bond, neither one names the cost. But love that requires one person to disappear is just fear wearing intimacy's clothing. The nervous system test for real love. There is one question that filters illusion from truth. Do I feel safer as myself in this relationship, or safer as the version of me that doesn't upset anyone? Most people don't answer with words. Their body answers for them. The answer is found in the breath that shortens before speaking, the pause before naming a need, the apology that appears before the truth, the way the spine curves down instead of up when expressing disappointment, the way intimacy becomes something to manage rather than something to inhabit. Love that costs you yourself isn't love. It's an emotional performance with a survival script underneath, and the body always knows. The return to self isn't rejection, it's regulation. There is a belief many people still carry silently. If I stop abandoning myself, I will lose the relationship. That fear is not irrational. It was true in childhood. But healing is what makes it no longer true in adulthood. To stop self-abandoning is not to become selfish. It is to become fully present, fully regulated, and fully capable of loving without resentment. A boundary does not end intimacy. It preserves it. A regulated nervous system does not reduce passion. It stabilizes it. And telling the truth does not break the connection. It gives it a chance to be real. Most relationships don't end because two people can't love each other. They end because one or both people never learned how to stay connected while staying intact. Love collapses not from a lack of affection, but from a lack of emotional oxygen. Personal reflection. There was a time I believed that being understanding was the same thing as being loving. If I could explain someone's behavior, I could endure it. And if I could endure it, I was proving loyalty, depth, maturity, even spiritual growth. But the nervous system pays the bill for what the mind justifies. I realized I wasn't being compassionate. I was being absent from myself. I was calling it love, but it was exhaustion disguised as emotional wisdom, a familiar exhaustion that felt like home. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was the moment I noticed that I could speak truth with a steady voice. I could say no without shaking. That I could want a connection without needing to collapse to keep it. That I could love someone without making my own disappearance the evidence of love. Real love didn't make me smaller. It made me upright again. The close of Layer 2, every episode in this layer has explored one relational mirror after another: boundaries, projection, repair, conflict, empathy, and now intimacy. But the thread beneath all of them has been the same. Can I stay regulated and present in a relationship without losing myself to it? That is the heart of the compassion code, the boundary episode, the trigger episode, the repair episode, and this one. Love is not proven by how much pain you tolerate. Love is proven by how much truth the connection can hold without requiring erasure. And here is the closing affirmation of this layer. I can stay connected without disappearing. If the body believes that, the love will not break, because the person inside it won't. Reflection prompts. When you speak inside love, does your voice expand your chest or tighten it? When you ask for reassurance, does your body feel grounded or apologetic? When you imagine loving long term, does it feel like freedom or like management? And most of all, when your nervous system settles, does the relationship still feel like love, or does it only feel like love when you're tense? Whatever the answer is, that is the real mirror. With this episode, we complete Layer 2, Relational Mirrors. Next, we go inward, not into partnership, conflict, or repair, but into the one voice every relationship must negotiate. Layer 3, Deep Mirrors, and the first episode is episode 21, The Inner Narrator, Self-Talk Awareness, rewiring the internal dialogue. Because the way we speak to others always begins with the way we speak to ourselves. Until next time, thanks for joining me today. Love has never asked you to disappear. Only fear does that, and when the body is safe, the heart can stay. You've been listening to Mirror Talk, the language of the nervous system. I'm James Miller.